All right, I see a few people joining. Guillermo, Shauna, Daniel, welcome. We'll get started in about a minute. Thanks for joining. I see people joining us from YouTube and LinkedIn. If you're already on, say hi like everybody else is doing. Let them know where you're at. Let us know if you have any comments. David's joining us today, so we'll talk about a few things on the agenda, but certainly we'll answer your questions too. So let us know. Okay, and good morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Let's get David off of mute. Thanks for joining us. It's another Friday, the Cutaway Security ICS Friday Infosec chat. This is May 6, 2022. I see a bunch of people joining us, both from LinkedIn and from YouTube. Thank you for spending your lunch or morning with us today. And we're gonna have a good time. We're joined by David Foose, and for another one of our conversations. This week at Cutaway Security, I like to start off with talking about what we did this week. Some of the challenges and some of the things I was able to accomplish. Of course, during the beginning of the week, this is a weird week. We're out in San Diego teaching a class. It started midweek instead of starting on a Monday. I started on actually on a Thursday, so our first day was yesterday. The beginning of the week, I did pick up some work, which was good. It's continued that project that we were talking about last week, which is working with the vendor, document review, system review, kind of updating some of the things that they did. Some tight milestones. It's always a challenge when the project is towards the end, and there's still a lot to accomplish. So we did what we could during that time, and hopefully we'll have some follow-on with that team. I'm really excited. I know a lot more about that product now. I don't want to call it out. Of course, we work in an industry with NDAs, but certainly it is good to see some movement in the documentation and the improvement on security. But we are here in San Diego for the SANS conference. I'm teaching ICS 410. I've got a great group of students, both online and with us today. A few of them walked in, so they're going to have to listen to us while we're chatting, hear one end of the conversation. But that's what we did this week. So David, hey, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. I see you're wearing a different hat. So is there anything you want to talk about?
Literally a different hat. If those who may remember me from Emerson, I worked at the Ovation side of the house of Power and Water, and that I did that, and then recently took a job as a product manager in the Dragos, doing the platform, but also hardware and some other kinds of things over there, trying to do some of that work for them. So, yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, congratulations on the move, the new challenges. I know that's, I talk to a lot of people and they're like, I can't move, I can't do this, I can't go take this new opportunity. We've got these projects and stuff like that. Business is going to move on with or without you. You might have put a lot of time in. I think you said you put over a decade in over at Emerson. I know you probably learned a lot, and but at every point in everybody's career, it's time to move on, whether it's the organization is kind of directing it, or it's your own personal choices. So I just want to congratulate you on just taking a move and getting out there.
Well, thank you. I mean, really, honestly, a lot of people that people are calling it the Great Resignation, and I think what happened was we had the pandemic, and everybody got work from home, and then they started evaluating where they are in the industry or where they are in their life, and that's I think I was one of those people. My wife got a new job inside of Emerson. She's always been a more powerful person, but I got a job outside of Emerson, so we'll see how it all works out.
I'm sure it's going to be great. I mean, it's our industry is important. There's a lot of different roles, and anywhere we can give back, as long as we're learning from our experiences and taking that and putting it forward. Yeah, I think the experience within this industry is definitely improving. So
Yep.
it's good to see. So you joined us because I posted the agenda on some of the channels where I'm like trying to get people to jump in,
Yeah.
and let's I'll share it real quick once again. So it wasn't the first two, it was that last one. It was the time servers and control environments, and you wanted to know if I'm asking a question or making a statement. So
Yeah.
maybe what are your thoughts on time servers and control environments?
I can chat on all three because they're all relevant things that I had to do in the past. But on time servers are you industrial processes. If you are of any kind of size, uh, time is extremely important. Very, very, very important. Even if you're a small industrial process, is important. It generally it's way more important than it would be in any kind of IT or home network kind of situation. You have sequence of events that you have to worry about, and even you're down to the nanoseconds, milliseconds on kind of stuff. So not having real good time uh, can cause major problems. Not to go off on it, but we had a situation at Emerson on nuclear back when a 32-bit time was still a thing. We had a nuclear facility. It was going to last past 2038. And they asked, what are we going to do about time at that point? For those who don't understand the 32-bit time, it's a value. At 2038 in January, that number rolls over, and it's suddenly 1970 all over again if you don't have your set value correct. So they didn't want to suddenly have every one of their whole control systems just suddenly think it's 1970 and have to put bell bottoms back on. So the that is time is extremely, extremely important, and having good time is hard to do without having a GPS clock, or at least something syncing to a GPS clock that you can sync from and to. In most networks, you'll find that either syncing to the network itself, the actual infrastructure, or sometimes your Active Directory controller will be your time source. But you generally want to have a good clock that you can point to.
Now, so when you're talking about that, are you talking about network time protocol? Or are you talking about precision time protocol? Does it do both of those?
You you have to have a good set value, and it's providing that. And then from there, you can base your time because calculating time across even the time zones or across systems can be challenging. So you have to have at least a good number to start from. So yes, we usually use GPS clocks, but
Mhm.
so, sometimes they're not. Like one
Well,
Brandon just came up with. There's actually
mhm.
recent issues have arisen where the GPS signal can be overwhelmed, and you can set time differently. It's happened accidentally a couple times, and supposedly some people believe it can happen maliciously, where I believe in one particular case it was on the West Coast. GPS time was messed up for a nuclear facility because of military activities nearby, and the clock got messed up, and it caused some really interesting events.
So, well, I mean, but at that point, I mean, doesn't it require a certain amount of time uh, to uh, to really mess up time? Meaning that the different stratum layers, it has that time has to propagate down. You've got peers that you're also synchronizing with to understand the trusted sources and drift and so forth. So,
Right.
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, even on the simple aspect, if you're like back in the old days, like couple decades ago when I was still a regular administrator for stuff, if you had your stratums wrong, so who is the
Mhm.
time source and who disagreed on who was the actual main time source, you could have real problems where things didn't agree on time, so then they just stopped talking to each other. Today, we've actually had some situations recently on products I've seen where the time was messed up a little bit, It thought it was a different day. It thought it was 10 years in the past because the machine hadn't just been imaged and brought in, and the BIOS clock wasn't set correctly, and it wasn't syncing
Hmm.
anywhere, and your TLS certs didn't match. So because
Ah,
time was completely, totally messed up. So it thought you were a time traveler and it wouldn't agree that you were correct. And when you change the time back, your TLS certs still didn't match. So you're obviously not authenticated, and it caused a complete reimaging of everything to make it function. So
wow.
it was like, once your time is just a hair off, a lot of things just fall down really fast.
Now, I've seen environments where, I mean, there's two questions I have. I mean, the first one is, if I've been in environments, substation environments where, where they do have a time server, but they're not synchronizing any of the operating systems. And when I ask questions about it, they're, well, we're more worried about how long the packets live on the network than synchronizing the system time. And of course, the incident responder in me is just like, no, don't think like that. But at the same time, okay, so help me understand that a little bit.
Well, I would say that even if your time is wrong, as long as everybody's wrong, sometimes your network can be okay. As long as you, because it's one of those things, as long as the ground truth is the same ground truth, um, you try to, and like in the case, like Tyler just asked, when can you build in some kind of tolerance? Sometimes you can do multiple time sources, and then they kind of check each other, or sometimes you can have your device take a look at the network who's taking time from something else more official upstream. But you'll also find on some of these small devices, at least stuff that's older, not so much now, they only have one value you can set in there as where they're going to get their time from.
Hmm.
So it can be problematic if that suddenly disappears. So then generally you have a clock anyway, on the device, Linux, Windows, whatever. It's going to have time locally. It's taking time from itself. You just, during very critical time periods, pun slightly intended, like initial communication, or if you were trying to sync up between something, uh, if you are off by a little bit, things can get a little wonky. So
Right.
it's
And that was my next question was, are the applications, so you've got the servers and you can configure the servers to look for time and have a time source. But are vendors, are they putting the time source in their applications so that they're ignoring the server and they're actually looking at, or they're ignoring the system they're on and actually looking at a server, or are they all going off the system, or is it typically going off the system time?
software packages, as far as I can tell, aren't pulling time. Software time is,
Mm.
will be taking it from the system time. System time is normally taking it upstream from whoever is their master. Windows devices are probably going to be from Active Directory. Active Directory, like in the old environments that I would be involved with, we would point Active Directory to the network hardware, since there's a lot of it. Normally, your
Mhm.
core systems, switches and routers, and then the core switches and routers take it from a time clock. If you have a good reason, like you want no one to go upstream in case something goes weird, um, and generally time clocks should not drift a whole bunch. There is some drift, and you'll have sometimes go out of whack a little bit, but um, then you could all point to the time clock, if you really want to. But if then you have to, there's this things called stratum levels where you have to set who is master of who, and you have to set the numbers levels, and people just generally don't. So they take it. They assume they assume that whenever you design a product, especially a software, but also definitely even hardware, you have to assume you're the only thing sitting in that network or in that area, because you have to start there. I can't
Mhm.
assume that you're going to have a time clock. I can't assume that you're going to have this device or person who's able to do something. So I have to build everything in and look at myself first, and then hope that that is properly architected for what you need to do for your environment.
Yeah, and I mean that makes a lot of sense. Uh, and I can kind of tell whenever I get onto a network and I just start passively sniffing, I can kind of tell when somebody's doing time when they've organized it. If I can see the NTP traffic that is being requested from a local time source, or it's I've gone into organizations where IC requests for the NTP pool, but also the United States Navy, and then any number of other time servers, and not a specific IP address within or domain within their organization. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's interesting, and I remember, and I think it was last year, but it might have been the year before. But I do think it was last year, the ICS summit. Tim Conway and Jeff Shearer gave a talk about time, and that time is actually being used within some of the applications. That's actually being stored in the databases, so that when you do start messing with the time and you get some of that drift, some of those values get off. If you can send. If you can modify the information that's being exchanged, so through some type of machine in the middle attack, modifying those timestamps, now the application gets completely out of whack as well.
like another example of time being weird, causing problems. Just recently, within the last 5 years, maybe 6 years ago, there was a bug that they quickly fixed inside of Apple iOS where they had a time underrun. Because whenever you get on your device, it looks at time for things like your calendar entries, for last time you plugged in for charging. It's been so many minutes since you last charged, um, and stuff like that. So it calculates time really fun. What someone found out was there was a time underrun, even though it was a 64-bit value, so that you could actually do a lot of time based on that. If you set your clock to January 1st, 1970 at midnight or 12:01 a.m., your last time you charged was suddenly thousands of years in the future, and it caused the Apple device to completely freeze up and brick. And the only way you could go there was to re-image your device. So you had to take it to an Apple store. They had to tear it apart and re-image it because it couldn't calculate time anymore. So it's and why is it 1970? Because someone just chose a date. Like if you could, one of the old jokes in this industry is you could tell a security person if their birthday is January 1st, 1970, because that's generally the start of time inside of most databases and time calendars and stuff like that. So
That's hilarious. Well, and I'm seeing a lot of people. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces. Wes, Chase, thanks for joining us. Brandon, it's good to have you back. Tyler, I think that's the first time I've seen you. You might have joined us before. I just might have missed it. Shauna, congratulations, as we mentioned before. Daniel and Guillermo, thanks for joining us again. We really appreciate it. If you do have any other questions, I've noticed, and David's actually picked up on it and answered a few questions. We really appreciate that. If you have something you want to talk about your week or ask us questions. Oh, it looked like Wes does have a question. Can a time server system affect the activation of a safety system? David, you're probably a little bit more familiar with the safety systems than I am. So what do
what
you think?
they are still controllers. They are still logic solvers. I have never programmed a safety system itself. So I will not tell you that if it's based on time. It may be based on, normally they're based on values. So over voltage, pressure, that kind of stuff that would kick in at that point. I'm sure, uh, that we've had being that most of the time we've had is that, again, pun slightly into there. Most of the time we would have, when we have time drift issues or time disagreements, it would happen in later on in the logging or algorithmic based stuff that would look at, okay, when are we doing certain processes? If time was slightly off, um, we would not be able to run certain processes inside the logic of the controller itself, or you would see it in your historian, like sequence events would be all off, and you wouldn't be able to go historically back and see that
Mhm.
your values were changing really weird. So I mean, that's why would you have to have time exist between multiple networks and all syncing to a similar clock in case your
Mhm.
time, like right now, one of the problems we've had in renewables is that you might be physically in one place doing taking action on a control system that may exist in multiple time zones in another country. People who are handling wind farms from Europe,
Mhm.
that are in Latin America or in the United States or off the coast of China. So if you all aren't agreeing on time when you take an event at who knows what time, and if you aren't agreeing on what the actual values are, and syncing to the same time clock, it can get really hairy really fast.
Yeah, we were, and it's actually coming up. I do another series for SANS, the ICS concept videos, one of the people I talked with a few weeks ago, and it should be coming out soon. He works in the maritime field, and he specifically talks about time and actually messing up GPS. He calls out a few instances where, yeah, and more than likely it's military events, but the oh gosh, the Strava, the Strava data actually can help identify when some of these events are going on. I don't think anybody is owned up to or has is specifically claiming or talking about what the actual attack was or what was generating that attack, but it's really odd. Some basically crop ring circles from a GPS perspective, so.
No, the U.S. government has definitely, it's been a small drumbeat by certain groups who are really worried about this time based overwhelming time clocks as an attack, or EMP is another one that people get into really hairy situations where me as a vendor back then, it'd be like, what are you going to do about a near Earth explosion of a nuclear weapon that causes an EMP to knock out East Coast? I'd be like, well, first off, I would start my crops in the backyard, I guess, at this point,
Yeah.
because there's not. I mean, we can build in physical systems, but I'm hoping no near Earth EMP attacks, but they could happen.
Yeah, and so how do people, because basically GPS, you need your own. If you're not leveraging that, if you're not doing that, you need your either an own atomic clock, or you
Right.
just set up two servers and leverage those as your time source, and don't connect the antennas. I mean, how are people that you've experienced handling not relying on GPS for their Stratum Zero?
There are atomic clocks that you can get. I haven't seen too many of those in use, but there are ways
Mm,
to not use GPS signal as your. But it's just so common. You'll see what a small little rack mount will look like a normal 1U network device, and there'll be a long cord going out, and there'll be some kind of looking like a CB looking antenna sticking
mm,
somewhere so that they can pull the actual GPS signal, and then you hope no one's going to overwhelm you because you're in Colorado or something like that. So
mm, mm.
it's one of those things. I don't know the easy way, because how do you? It's one of those situations that everybody's using something because it works until it doesn't. So what are
Until
we
it
going to
doesn't,
do
right? Exactly.
until? What are you going to do as a security professional? How are you going to? Do you feel like this is a high enough risk that you need to build in resiliency at
Right.
that point?
Yeah. Do we really want to be planning for every single worst case scenario out there? I mean, that's going to get really super expensive if we start
Yep.
taking that approach. And coming back around to what Brandon was saying, and my incident response background always pulls me to this. And I think it was the point of the conversation that I was having with some people last night that kind of brought up the whole time server thing, is that even though some of our organizations, they do rely on time, and when time is a priority to the process, they configure it, and they configure it correctly, and they do their best to keep it in sync, and they got a plan for detecting when it gets out or where they're having problems, it's more of the processes, business continuity and disaster recovery plan. But in places that don't need it, either they might have bought it just because it was a part of the solution, but they're not configuring things. And so the problems that people are experiencing there is that they don't have that synchronization. And one of the things that Tim asked me for last night is like, hey, Don, write me a tool that I can tell the delta for every server, and you'll synchronize all of the logs for me. And and so now I've been thinking about that. Okay, how do I get the servers? Oh man, I'm getting the system time, but now I need to get the time zone that it's set to as well, so I can understand what that is. It's incident response. syncing your servers to a time source, making sure that they're all on the same thing, I think is really important. Let's see, we've got Wes, we've got Oscar that's joining us, and greetings. Oscar's joining us from 2 different locations, so welcome, Oscar, and I hope you're there. So we still got a few minutes, David.
Yep.
So at the beginning of the month, next month is the SANS ICS Summit. You're going to be out there, right?
Yep. I'm actually, they unfortunately selected one of my talks. I've it's one of those things after doing this for a number of years of doing the talks. You always submit and you get sad when you don't get picked. But then when you get
Hmm.
picked, you're like, ah, now I got to write it, especially if it's not one you've ever done in the past. So it was always
Right.
easier when I'm working at the other establishment because they would just have me do the same deck over and over and over again. And if I needed to update it, it was fine, but it was the same talk over and over again for sales purposes. So
Well, I mean, and somebody reminded me, and it was oh gosh, and I'm blanking right now, but I asked that question at Wild West Hacking Fest, and I was like, man, I'm getting fatigue. I'm getting a presentation fatigue, because every time I talk at a place, I'm writing a new presentation, and he looked at me and he's like, why are you doing that?
right,
And I was like, well, it needs to be unique. I already talked about it. He's like, well, how many people did you talk to that first time? And I was like 50. And I was like, do you think more than 50 people saw that talk? Do you want to reach more people? I was like, yeah. And he's
yeah,
like, okay, give that talk again. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's right. It's like, if I've only reached, maybe their video that they recorded reaches another 100 or 200 people. There's what, 6 billion people in the world right now.
right.
How am I going to reach all those people? So talk reuse, recycling that information, you're going to reach a lot more. You might have a few, I mean, so people are going to walk out because they've already heard you discussing it. Who cares? They're moving on, and they're going to learn something else, and be happy for them.
I look at people who are able to continuously talk about the same product and the same thing for decades in a row and do it at every single event and almost have the exact same jokes. But you have to think about it, like some of the best artists in the world, people show up not for the new album. They want to hear the old hits. So even
Mhm.
though your talk may be on something you've talked about, as long as you're passionate about it, you may be able to throw in a few extra jokes in there. And I had a bank of like 6 talks that I had built that were, because one of the things, especially in this industry, if you get spending there long enough in there, they want you to go to these conferences, but they don't want you to talk about product. They don't want you to do marketing talks. So you have to come up with general talks about topics. And so I created a bunch of different talks on topics, just general topics about security or being a vendor or whatever it might be. And then I would just submit those and and so that you know they'd pick one of the 6 and they go, okay, we'll do that
Mhm.
one, and then I'll just show up. And if I most of my decks also I it would just be pictures, so just one picture and almost nothing, no text, so that you can say whatever you want on the stage at that point, and it'd be a lot of fun. But the and you could just riff up there for like a half an hour on what you had for breakfast if you really wanted to, because they don't really have any way to pull you off stage. So that's
Yeah.
part of the fun.
Yeah. So I do see a question from Tyler, and we've got a few minutes left, and I think I can field this one. So how do you go about getting ICS experience if you don't work in the ICS environment? Any labs or equipment, individuals? So yeah. Well, it looks like you want to answer. Go ahead, David. What are you
No,
thinking?
it's the same conversation. I don't know how to get in there. It's chicken and egg situation, and I didn't start out in industrial control. My wife didn't start out in industrial control. What happened was, if is you start helping, you may end up with some of the bad jobs that nobody wants, but you at least you start working somewhere, treat it like critical IT, get some, be willing to dig into problems, and you'll find a lot of semi-entry based jobs in various industries where they just need some help, and go work with owner asset owners or something like that, and be there to help, and you'll get a little bit of experience. If you can't get experience with that, it's the same with breaking into industrial into regular security. start going to conferences, start going to doing your own research on stuff, and start giving a few talks, and somebody will give you a job because you seem like you know what you're talking about.
Yes, and it's my recommendation is first of all, Tyler, you're in you're in the right place to start researching that question. Plenty of the people that are on the show that are in the chat right now, Oscar and Brandon, they're part of the Cutaway Security Discord. They're part of the Black Hills Information Security Discord. We've got we talk on the Cutaway Security one. We talk about this subject, and we also give out references. One of the things I point a lot of people to are the ICS Village. They're doing a lot of things at a lot of different events. They show up at a lot of different conferences. That's a great way to start. But just doing your research. I talked about my ICS concepts videos, which is on the SANS YouTube channel. So if you go out there, you can get some basics. I try to give some basics, but also I get in to discussions with industry professionals that want to talk about a few things. So Shauna, what I'll do is I've got the Discord down right now so that we don't have this. I'll be sure if you look at my Twitter or you check the some of the other locations for this, we'll make sure you get it out there. So however you heard about us, whether it's through YouTube or through LinkedIn or Twitter, you should be able to find that Discord there, or just search for Cutaway Security. So David, I really appreciate your time. Oh, go ahead, sir. Yes.
One last one for that, also Tyler's purposes. You don't need a lab. You don't need to do hacking on a PLC. You don't need to do all these things to be industrial control security. That is such a small subset of security that you can do compliance work. You can do a lot of policy work. You can do a lot of just helping out, and that will get you into the industry, because there's very little actual hacking of the controller that you have to worry about. There's so much out there that translates from other security fields that you could work on and still be helping out with these control networks.
Okay, so and actually I was trying to pull up Discord. We're at the end of the end of our half an hour. So Oscar, thanks for joining us, man. We didn't really have time to talk to you, but we always appreciate you joining us. Shauna, I just put the an invite for the Cutaway Security Discord into the YouTube chat, so you should see that there. We appreciate that. David, always a pleasure having you on and spreading the knowledge about what you have for this organization or within the ICS field. And congratulations on your new position. Any thoughts on your way out, sir?
No, sir. We're all one big happy family, whether or not we all started doing this together and we're all in the same room kind of situation. So we're here to help as best we can. Just hang out and we'll see you later.
Awesome, Oscar. Any words of wisdom before we get off?
No, I think David just mentioned that you don't need expensive equipment to start. Sometimes just a virtual machine, you can start. There are plenty of simulators that you can use. You can start just learning about Modbus. Modbus is still very, very used in industry, and just learning how it works, creating a couple of virtual machines, and you can create your PCAPs. You can start analyzing, see how you interact. There are plenty of information about soft PLCs that you can run in containers. So you don't need the expensive equipment to start. It's just and I think now we are in a time that all the information is there, and most of the companies provide the information. So it's up to you what you want to learn.
Absolutely, and join us on the Cutaway Security Discord, Tyler. There's everybody that's in there is willing to help and answer questions. So David, Oscar, thanks again, and everybody online, Shauna, Taylor, Daniel, Brandon, I appreciate you coming back again, and hope to see everybody that was new. Hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.